Hi, Maji. Can I go now? Okay, thank you so much. A very good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to the Leadership Game with myself, Dr. Pet Mazibuko. It is the 18th of November, 2023. That being said, let me just ask Maji, because we are now live, to give us the rules of engagement, and then we'll move from here. Over to you, Maji. Thank you so much, Maji. Colleagues, I just want to welcome all of you and also take a moment to welcome those that are connecting via YouTube and Facebook. Thanks a lot. But I also want to welcome our regulars, and due to load shedding, people are just switching off, but we're not going to wait. They're going to just be joining us. I've realized that some of the people now, Maji, they prefer to join us live on Facebook and YouTube, which is okay. Colleagues, we are dealing with a very interesting part today, which is leadership. I really love leadership, colleagues, and it's one thing that I really love from the bottom of my heart. I believe that as human beings, we need to learn, we need to relearn and also unlearn. That being said, colleagues, I just want to introduce our panelists today, and I'm going to ask you, when I introduce you as a panelist, just to switch on your video and also just check in. I'm going to start off with Pauline. Please come in, ma'am.
Good afternoon to everyone, and it's a pleasure being here once again with Dr. Pat. I'm Pauline Prithvi, and I am a health and safety practitioner working at one of our state-owned enterprises. And yes, it indeed is quite an exciting topic and very much needed where we are now as a country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pauline. Let's say good afternoon to Jabu Msomi. Jabu, please check in.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I am Jabu Msomi. I am a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner and a life coach. Actually, I'm very happy to be here and to be part of the panel this afternoon. I just want to start by quoting from an unknown writer. One cannot pour from an empty heart. An empty cup. Sorry. So I'm very excited about the topic this afternoon, and I look forward to a successful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Jabu is also a member of the Public Speaking Association of South Africa. Thank you so much, Jabu. Shall we go then to Pradam Koposi? Koposi, please check in.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Mtsetseleli Mkopozi. I am looking forward to this exciting conversation we're going to have today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Because we don't have time, I want to introduce our guest speaker today. But Dr. Rodney, I often say that I don't consider myself a leadership guru. I consider myself a passionate and a permanent leadership student. That's why learning, relearning, and co-learning is important to me. That being said, then, colleagues, let me introduce our guest speaker. He is Dr. Rodney Mudau, and I know him as a man of God. He's a father to two energetic senior or junior Mudaus. They're very energetic, and a husband to Motsuka. He's a friend and a confidant to some of the people. He's a top medical specialist that this continent is blessed with. I consider him to be one of the disciplinarians that this country has got. And yet he's a very simple person to deal with. He's very ethical and one of those people with a top character, as we say. You know, character tends to get there long before you get there, Dr. Rod, and it leaves behind when you've left us. So this is how I know Dr. Rod, and then colleagues, I did send out his profile both on LinkedIn and also on Facebook. So colleagues, today's theme is around personal health leadership. So before I allow Dr. Rod to lead us in the next 45 minutes or so, I just want to say that never ask a direction from a person that has never left home. So the people that we've got, the colleagues that we've got here today, starting with our guest of honor, Dr. Roth, including our panelists and all those that are here, these are the people that are highly experienced. They've left home a number of times, so it's at the right time that we could engage with them. But also maybe just linking up with what Usis Jabu has just said, is that you cannot win in life if you are losing in your mind. And it's one of the things that I always tell people, Dr. Roth, that you cannot win in life if you are losing in your mind. Therefore, you need to put mental health first or make that a priority. Ladies and gentlemen, TLG 365 introduces to you Dr. Roth Modam. And then, Doctor, you've got up until 4:45 or 10:05. Over to you, sir. Thank you so much. Let's enjoy the show. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but we can't see you yet.
Okay, I will start my video.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thanks, Doc. You may proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for Dr. Pett for inviting me to this platform. It's an absolute privilege and honor. And I also like to acknowledge my learned colleagues and the panelists. Thank you for being part of today's show or part of today's discussion and platform. This is not going to be a formal presentation. I'm mainly going to be leading. It's going to be more of engaging and involving kind of a discussion. So the discussion of today is personal health, and there are some pointers as to what we will be concentrating on in today's topic. It's a vast topic and one that is needed, today for people to be taught about, because if you look where the world is, and if you look what has happened over time and what the world is going through, this issue becomes of utmost importance. So when we talk about personal health, we've got to understand that there are different dimensions. I always say to, find out what is wrong, you must go back to the beginning. And therefore, we must understand what is a human being to start with. And then we can be able to unpack and understand what goes on when we talk about personal health. For example, when you talk about a human being is what we call a tripartite being. So there are a spirit, a soul, and a physical body. And any dysfunction in that sphere can cause physical manifestation of ill health or poor health in the physical body. So as much as people may want to focus on the, obvious, which is in the physical that they see, for example, they have, you have a lump on your body, you feel a headache, you feel pain in the chest and all of that. Those are merely physical manifestations. The problem, any problem or disorder or dysfunction in any of the three aspects of the human being can result in a physical symptoms. And also just to emphasize that, the other dimensions, the spirit part is more superior than the soul and than the physical body. And so when we talk about personal health, having that background, then we talk about it in a more holistic manner. I always teach my patients to say, you come to me with a physical symptom and you are needing healing or a solution to that problem. But I always approach the problems in a holistic manner, because I realize that if you focus on the physical symptoms, you are merely addressing the fruit and not the root cause of the problem. So in line with the what Dr. Pett has highlighted for us to be addressing today, one of the common issues today, which we see, I always tease my fellow professionals in the field of psychiatry, psychology, and so on. I say, psychiatry is one of the most prospering fields today because of what the world is going through. And this brings us to the issue of stress, in life. The world has gone through a lot, especially after COVID. So, I always put it this way, figuratively, and say, many people are on life support, meaning, anything can happen to tip them over to the other side, and they're literally no longer alive, in figuratively speaking. It means people are going through a lot emotionally, mentally, and physically. And people are stressed, so to say. But we must understand, what this issue is about. When we talk about stress, for example, the term stress it's a loose term that people just apply. But when we go deep to understand what stress is all about, we then begin to understand that the real issue is the body trying to adjust itself through physiological mechanisms. So there has to be what we call a stressor, like the COVID that happened, like strategy, events that people go through on day to day and periodically. Those are the things that we would call stressors. And the body tries to cope to maintain itself. And that's what causes stress. So when you talk about stress, you have things that would affect the body. So the body, what the body tries to do, the body tries to go through stages, and the physiological mechanisms are aimed at maintaining the energy and redistributing of the energy body. And you have an acute stress, you've got episodic stress, you've got chronic stress, for example. And there is some people also use the term good and bad stress. But the focus of today is a negative stress or the negative impact of stress. If you look into what the body does, for example, through endocrinological and nervous system mechanisms to maintain and redistribute energies in the body. The body goes through an acute, in that adaptation process, in the, trying to deal with stress, the body goes through what we call an alarm. Either you decide to deal with the situation, or you fly, or you run away, or flight, from the situation. And if the stress is persistent, then the body goes through what we call adaptation. And in that process, at the end of the adaptation, either the stress is over or the body is worn out. And then that's when people can go through the long-term effects now of stress, and it becomes a chronic problem. And this is where people experience depression, for example. And there are many other non-specific symptoms that people present with. Lack of sleep, lack of energy, being moody, being irritable. Those are non-specific symptoms that will indicate that the person is stressed, and the body has tried to cope, but it's no longer coping. It has exhausted its coping mechanism or its resources for coping with the stress. Now, when that has happened, then that leads to the negative and long-term effects, like people are at a high risk of having a stroke, cardiovascular problems like ischemic heart disease or heart attack, and many other issues. So those are the long-term effects of stress. But like I always say, the stress is inevitable in the sense that every day of our lives we are navigating through life. And that's what we call normal stress and abnormal stress. So in other words, the day we are navigating things, that's a normal stress. But there is what an abnormal stress, which is when the body tries to cope with those abnormal stress, and that leads to all those, you know, adaptation and so on systems that goes on in the body. So in the days that we're in, it is becoming evident that people are stressed, very, very much stressed. And so the question becomes, how do we, having understood stress, how do we deal with stress in this day and age, for example? Like I said, I think the approach should always be holistic, just like health in general. You know, people who try to approach it from one standpoint of view, they always fall short. Because, for example, if you have a physical symptom, you know, that is there, it could be originating from your mind, it could be originating from the realm of the spirit, it could be originating from your physical body. So if you are very good, for example, in exercising, you are very good with your diet, it's all good, which is good. But that's looking after your physical body. You have done well in that department. If you ignore your mind, you will also have problems. The same thing is if you develop your mind and ignore your physical body, you will also have challenges with your physical body. It also goes more importantly from the realm of the spirit because it's more superior. So if you are very good, you have developed your mind, you train your mind, you are into meditation, psychology, and all of these things, and you exercise, you eat well. When the problems has originated from the realm of the spirit, you will not be able to deal with such a challenge. So the message is quite clear. We need to be well-balanced people. We cannot afford to ignore one area of life and hope that everything else will be fine. So we need to address all parts of a human being, spiritually, the soul, which is mind, the will, and the emotions, and also the physical body. Then we will be able to survive the times that we're in, because it is becoming clear that, you know, now I was just listening to people are sending around messages because of the storm that happened in Johannesburg on Monday night, for example. You know, even on the days when there is no prediction of severe storms, people are already stressed to say, is there going to be another storm? And so on and so on. You know, those are the events of life that are happening. So life has become that much unpredictable. So the question is, how do people arrive at a point of rest and just, you know, be able to cope with the events of life that unfold? That's on top of, you know, attending to personal things. I'm talking now national or global events that happen, you know, that make people to live in a state of anxiety, in a state of depression, and so on and so on. So I think we need to approach stress from that perspective to say, you know, we will have to deal with stress and we will have to deal it holistically from a spiritual, from a mind perspective, and to the physical perspective. From the perspective of the mind, you know, there is a saying that as a man thinketh, so is he. You know, the mind is so powerful. God himself once checked the people who were intending to build a tower of Babel. And he says, if these people are not stopped, they will achieve what their mind is made up to achieve. So that basically says the mind is so powerful. And it is one aspect of the human being that because it is part of the soul is powerful. That aspect has to be developed and capacitated in a good way. So we have to train our minds, we have to develop our minds in order for that effect to run off into our physical bodies. You know, and it has to do with what really you expose and what you feed your mind to. That tends to form the cornerstone of what you generate. You know, people will know that there is a conscious and the subconscious mind. So what you continuously feed consciously into your mind becomes part of your subconscious. And eventually, in time, that's really whom you come to be. So we have to look after our minds. We have to, especially in these days, I mean, I was looking at after COVID, you know, a lot of healthcare professionals were depressed, and they had gone through a lot, what you call post-traumatic stress disorder. Most people decided to leave their jobs. Others went to do different things because it was very traumatic what they went through. And so there was a need to counsel, there was a need to debrief people, there was a need to cleanse the people's minds, so to say. So it's an important aspect that we cannot ignore, you know. Moving on to the question of how does personal health leadership affect personal success on and off the pitch? So, you know, when you are not well, there is not much you can do. You know, if you take a rich man who is dying and you tell him what is his wish, he won't tell you to make more money. He won't tell you he wants to buy another yacht or build another house and all of that. He will tell you that he needs his health back. So all the impacts of mental, physical health upon our productivity, upon our well-being and leadership. So if I'm not well, I cannot be able to lead, for example, and I cannot be able to be productive, and so on and so on. So in every way, mental and physical health affects our productivity. It affects our performance. It affects our, you know, leadership. It affects our work, and it affects our relationships. It affects everything about us if we look into it. Yeah. And then the impact of personal lifestyle and associations. Well, you know, it has been said that company, what you keep or the people you keep are, you know, it's eventually rubs off on you, whether good or bad company. So if I'm associating with people who are diligent about exercising and looking after their bodies and eat healthy, that will inspire and it will also rub off on me. But if my closest confidants or around me, friends and so on, are people who don't do that, eventually that will also rub on me. So the company of the people we keep around is important. You know, it affects our life choices. It affects how we look after ourselves mentally. You know, conversations that you will have with people, is it building mentally? You know, is it encouraging you to look after your body? Is it encouraging you to be more spiritual? Because the idea is to have a holistic approach into personal health. A very interesting and a very, you know, point of interest for me personally. How does our relationship with God come into all of this? Well, I always say, you know, one of the humbling things about life is to come to a realization that we as people, by design, those who do engineering will understand these things. By design, we were created insufficient. What do I mean by that? There is a support, there is a backing, there is that we need from the realm of the spirit. To put it in another way, the Bible says the spirit helps our infirmity. The term infirmity actually in the Old Testament means sickness. So we were born, you know, the term man, the original term, if you go to the Greek or the Hebrew, it means anthropos, meaning to look up, to look up. So you are looking for support or for help, you know. So we were created insufficient, and we always need to take that into cognizance. Our, you know, our human self-effort can only take us that far. There is a certain limit beyond which we can't go. So that means, our spiritual aspect is very, very important. Because as I said, it's more powerful. So we need to build our relationship with God. Investment into our spiritual life is utmost important, because anyhow, we need the backing from the realm of the spirit, especially in the days that we're in. We will realize that we need a backing from the realm of the spirit. Otherwise, we find ourselves, firstly, it starts mentally, mentally we cave in. I always say to people, once you lose the battle in the mind, you have lost the battle in the ground. That is a foregone conclusion. So that's how that process starts. And even with spiritual things, it starts in that manner. The things happen in the realm of the spirit, it comes to our mind, and then it manifests in our physical bodies. So our relationship with God is very, very important, and we need to invest time into our relationship with God. God is our only hope in these days and the times that we're in. Now, in terms of balancing of urgent matters and important matters, there is a saying that wisdom is a principal thing. I think we need wisdom in this life. And that wisdom also, becomes part of, in a way, indirectly or directly, it affects our health. So when it comes to, prioritizing into deciding what are really important matters, what are really urgent matters. Somehow, life always creates urgent matters in a way. For those of us who have been alive, even for a short while, we would come to a conclusion to say there always seems to be some emergencies that comes, urgent matters. So we now have to learn to prioritize to say what is actually important. For example, my health, it's very, very important because, I say to people, if you say you don't have time to pray, you are busy with 1, 2, 3. The time you get a sickness or something happens, you are going to stop that which was keeping you busy, and then you will have time to pray. So in reality, you do have time to do important things. That is the message. So we must always have the wisdom to know what is really important in our lives, and we should attend to important things. Emergency or urgent things, we will have to attend each situation on its merit, because many things seem urgent, but they're not really urgent. So we have to keep that balance of deciding, okay, this is important, this is urgent. And that requires wisdom. And then a general approach into problem solving. It's a broad and topic on its own. I think, one person who wrote a book that became a second selling book beside the Bible. The book is named, if I'm not mistaken, The Purpose, Why Am I Here on Earth? He says, he was asked, one of the things he wrote was asking to define life. And he said, life is a series of problems. He said, you have either moved out of a problem, you are either in the middle of a problem, or you are moving into a problem. So the message is clear. Problems are part of life in a way. And therefore, we must develop efficient problem-solving skills. But like I said, there is what we can do as human beings. And there are problems that are beyond our capacity. So we need to understand what kind of problem we are faced with. But lo and behold, there are ways to efficiently solve problems and to address problems whenever they arise in life. As I said, problems are always part of our lives in many ways. So I think one of the ways in which one can is to always to understand what is the root of the problem. When a problem arises, one must understand what is the root of the problem and also what is needed to solve the problem. It might be outside help or resources are needed to solve the problem, or the problem can be solved by one person or two people or within the in-house, so to say. So that's a practical approach to say, when a problem arises, what is the problem? And firstly, having acknowledged that problems are part of life, when problems arise, we are not in the state of crisis with every problem. There are genuine crises in life that will happen, but not every problem is a crisis. So we need to have that mentality and approach to approach every problem with in that manner or mind of calmness, and having identified what the problem is, then we try to identify what can be done to solve the problem. And we then take proactive action or steps to correcting or addressing the problem, having looked into the problem. And so, Dr. Pett, I think I have come to the end of the short presentation I had.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Mdao, and well taken there. And as you made an opening statement, you said this is going to be an engagement kind of a session. Let me start right from there.
Yeah.
And for today's purpose, Dr. Rod, I've called something that I called mountains to climb. Therefore, there are 4 mountains that I would want you to talk about. The first one is self-doubt. What is the impact of self-doubt in terms of personal health? Secondly, it is self-criticism. I think a lot of people tend to criticize themselves, maybe too far to a point that they are unable to come back or to recover from that. Thirdly, it's anxiety. And lastly, trauma. Can we talk about that in the interest of personal health? Over to you then, Doc. Then I'm going to go to the panelists.
Yeah, sorry. Let's just let's just recap again, Dr. Pett.
All right. The first one is self-doubt.
It's self-doubt.
Self-criticism.
Yes.
3, anxiety. And lastly, trauma.
The last one
is trauma.
Trauma, yes. Okay, I got that. Okay, yeah. Let's start with the issue of self-doubt. I think, there are many things that determine what a person is from their upbringing. Okay, number one, that means what they've been exposed to. So what does that mean? If I grew up with a lot of affirmation, I grew up around a lot of love. My voice was heard, I was listened to, I was encouraged, I was given hope and so on of that. That means my chances of having self-doubt are low, rather, right? I mean to say. So we must understand the upbringing of a person, what they've been exposed to and what they've been through. That tend to place them in a particular space in life. And number 2, the achievements or the success or the failure of a person. So in other words, if I've tried so many things and I fail, let's say I was writing matric or any other exam and I fail again, obviously I'm going to start wondering, am I good enough? So these are some of the things that increases self-doubt in people. So it is the background, what the people have been exposed to, the relationships and the support structure around them, their perceived success upon their lives. And which goes back to saying, what is success? Is it purely based on having cars, having gone to school, having gotten a qualification, having done that? For example, if a child is a gifted sportsman, the fact that they are not having a good academic whatever, does that mean they are a failure, for example? They will start doubting themselves in that aspect of life. But they should know that they are gifted in this area. Therefore, they don't have to compare themselves with the other person. They should run their own race. So the point is, people should be encouraged. People should run their own race in life. They should know their lane or their assignment or their path of what they're called to do. And they should not compare themselves with the next person. You should always compare with yourself with your former self. In other words, how was I 5 years ago? How was I 10 years ago? Is there a better version of me? Not better than the next person. No. I'm running my own path. I'm running my own race. So these are some of the things that leads to self-doubt. And that's some of the things. And I always say, a kind word to a person, whenever I meet people, whether in my practice or anywhere else, I always give them a word of encouragement. You will see, even a smile, whatever word of just being kind, being nice to someone, it builds someone's. That self-doubt that they know, that they used to. If you tell someone God loves you, it makes a big difference to their lives. So those are some of the things that lead to that, and those are some of the things we can do, that we can contribute ourselves to help to people not to be in a state of self-doubt. Moving into the second point, self-criticism. Again, these issues are intricately linked if you look into it. If you check self-criticism, it's again an issue of saying, okay, do I consider myself a success or not? Am I comparing myself with other people? So if I'm saying, I haven't achieved X, Y, Z, what is it based on? Is it based on my own calendar and time schedule, or it is based on what others are saying? Is it based on other people's projections for my life, or is it based on my own projections? So obviously there is a constructive self-criticism that's meant to build you as a person, to say, look, I haven't done well here, I can do better. That's positive, and it is needed. It's called self-introspection, if you look into it in another way. It's introspecting ourselves and challenging ourselves to do better in life. But there must always be a balance between the two. We can't let the drive and the outside circumstances lead us into a state of perpetual self-criticism. There must be a balance between building ourselves and encouraging ourselves, and being driven and being negatively, negative about things, and being criticizing ourselves all the time. Anxiety. Yeah, it's a very interesting, we see a lot of anxiety in this day and age. And again, there is anxiety has to do with mostly what people have been through in life. And I sincerely believe also there is a spiritual component to anxiety. If you deal with, when you come with people with anxiety, you realize that, number one, as I said, they've been through a lot of things, and the perception and the relationships of people around them have also not been helping. So much as they've been through things, there is no support structure to help them overcome or to move over beyond those things. And secondly, they themselves, the people, are in a state of self-doubt. So that's why I said these issues are intrinsically linked. So once you have self-doubt, you self-criticize, right? It is easy for you to be a candidate for someone to be a very anxious person, because you are already in a negative direction or in a negative energy. So all of these things, they in a way attract each other or accommodate each other. And if you have one, you are likely to have the other. So I think, once again, people with anxiety, we need, I always say, people, the world, if the world is full of love and tolerance, it will be a much better place. When you find someone who's anxious, the understanding that this person is anxious is the first solution, or it's self-problem solving, because you treat them with that understanding and you accommodate them and you help them to build their self-esteem, their self-belief. You help them to understand what they've been through. You help them to understand their own uniqueness, their own journey, to say, each one of us is unique. We are created uniquely. We are created, each of us, to run our own race, to have a specific assignment and purpose. If I look into what someone is doing, I shouldn't feel whatever about it. I'm running my own race. So we should understand these people, and we must encourage them, and we must have tolerance, and we must treat the people with love. And that makes a lot of difference in helping the people to overcoming anxiety. Obviously, there are, the role for psychology and therapy and all of that. We cannot overlook that. That is also a very, very important. But I always say, beyond the therapy room, beyond the discussions that happens in the therapy room, and which maybe not even everyone can afford, our human interactions ourselves is what really makes our difference, because 90% of the times we are interacting with each other, and how we interact with each other, it's what makes the difference to the next human being. Trauma. So a typical example would be what people went through during the era of COVID. That was a prolonged trauma. And people go through acute trauma. It can be a death, violence, and all of these things. All of that is trauma. That is why there is something called post-traumatic stress disorder. So I think, when people go through trauma, again, is that saying to say, we must understand what the person has been through, and support is very, very important in these people. As much as they, because once something traumatic happens, as I said, when I was discussing the issue of stress, I said, the body tries to cope with whatever the stressful event is. And once it exhausts its coping mechanisms, it relates into physical symptoms of what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. And in some people, it can be a problem that lasts for so many years. Some people may never recover from it. So trauma, it needs to be handled, with care. People have gone through trauma. They need to be given the utmost support. They need to go through proper structures of counseling and therapy and so on. To some point, we need to put these people even on medication for a short course to help them to survive the acute period. Because you have the acute period immediately after the trauma or after the traumatic event, and then you have the long-term coping and overcoming the problem, the events that have happened. So we need to help the people during the acute period, immediately after the traumatic event, and also have support mechanisms and therapeutic treatments going forward to help the people to overcome things. And people must not be pressured into saying you must overcome this within 2 weeks or 3 weeks. With all the support structures, people are different. Some can overcome things within a few weeks, some a few months, some will need a year or 2 years. But ultimately, as I said, how we give support to these people, how we interact with them, together with ongoing professional help and therapy, it's of utmost importance.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Mdao. I just want to go to our panelists now and ask them to respond on what you had perfectly highlighted. Let me start off with Jabu. Jabu, please, can you respond or ask a question or comment based on what Dr. Mdao has said? Jabu?
Thank you, Dr. Pet. Thank you, Dr. Mudau. Are we starting from the beginning or just the last questions that you asked?
No. Just cover what is said, and whichever way you want to comment on the question is fine.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mudau. Thank you. A lot of alignment there when Doctor started and shared that wellness should be a holistic thing. So it's a mind, it's a body, it's a soul. And then he said something very powerful, that the mind is actually a very powerful organ. It's something that I preach when I actually run workshops workshops rather, to say everything we do, our behavior is actually influenced by the mind. And to say, especially when you were going to the last question, to say things like self-doubt. If you've told your mind that, I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to cope on this, you won't cope, because the story and the work begins from the mind. And then as leaders, it's actually very important that we take mental wellness seriously. And it's important that we actually drive the narratives. Doctor said life is very busy, especially for leaders. And as a person who's worked alongside leaders and who've grown into leadership positions, sometimes life is actually very demanding, as Dr. Mudau was saying. But we need to learn, actually, and be intentional about striking that balance, to say, as much as work is demanding, but when do I make time, to do things, that serve my mind, to the best, my body and my soul, hence we become very, intentional about, having support, extra support. More than anything, get support, because you can't do everything on your own. Again, as Dr. was saying, you are going to fall and die, but get somebody that, we get personal trainers for that reason. That get somebody that will be supporting you towards, being, working on your body. And then he actually also alluded and mentioned the higher power, to say, be involved in prayer and, and whatever, just to gain strength, from the higher power that you believe in, and also to gain direction, as a person, and especially, as leaders. And I liked when Doctor said something which I learned, I think as a young professional, I would suffer, just a personal, experience. I used to suffer from headaches a lot, and then, but that, a doctor that I went to then, it was a GP. He said to me, I learned something very profound. Then he said, it can't be a headache. There must be an underlying reason. Indeed, obviously after, going through certain things, we realized it was an underlying, situation. So the point there is to say, in life, Dr. Mudau, said life is not easy. But in life, again, we need to be intentional about understanding that, life is a challenge. Every day is a challenge. But we go into each day with a mindset, with a positive mind more than anything, to say, this day, indeed, there will be challenges, that's for sure. But how do I tackle? What support do I have? As a person, how do I uphold and how do I raise awareness, around mental health? Dr. again, Mudau was saying earlier, there's been an increase. He said, actually, I think the mental health industry or something like that. Sorry to misquote you, doctor. But he said there's been like an increase or maybe a demand, that is correct. As much as I practice as an NLP practitioner, I'm also a life coach. So people are now starting to realize that life is not easy and you just can't manage on your own. It's still a journey. As much as it's still a journey, also, I would say traditionally, especially in the African tradition, to say you can't, maybe other colleagues will agree with me. You can't just say to a person, maybe go and see maybe your doctor your GP, it may be stress, then it's like an unknown subject. What is stress? What does it look like? So I think as professionals and leaders in this, in this field, it's also our role, as Doctor was saying, to say we need to preach this gospel that life is not getting any easy, but it's easier if you have the proper support structures and the mechanisms and actually the knowledge. You must know that when you feel like this, something is not right. So I think 2 days ago, my daughter was saying she had a headache, and then I was like, oh, to my surprise, I have a headache too. The important thing is that she was like, where about do you feel your headache? And I was like, on the side. And then we were trying to diagnose, obviously, but the point is, be intentional, listen to your body. Doctor, I think, mentioned that in one way or the other, to say, learn to listen to your body. But how do you do that? Like I said at the beginning, make time to make time for self-love, and make time to check in with yourself before checking in with everybody. Maybe just in closing, also in line with what Doctor has said, I ran a session a week ago with a corporate a group, and then we were doing work-life balance, and we were also doing mental wellness. But so the exercise we did is, when we go to those that work, even with families, we wake up and say, hello, how are you? Everyone is saying, I'm fine, I'm fine. But my question was, are you really fine? As teams, as leaders, do we allow, do we create environments that, people are, okay to say, actually, I'm not feeling well today, or are people afraid? Do we only, react when a person is dropping on the floor and we have to call medicals and stuff? But having said that, thank you so much, Dr. Mudau, and I'm fully aligned with what you've shared. And it's actually, the nuggets that you've been sharing, I've been taking notes, and I'm actually feeling very positive about, such topics, that more people will get support and will be helped. And thank you, Dr. Pat, for sharing, or allowing this platform rather to talk about these things. I could go on and on, because it's actually a topic that I'm very passionate about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jabu. Shall we go to Pauline? Pauline, have your say on the issues of the day. You can comment or respond on what Dr. Mudau has highlighted.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Doctor, and thank you, Pat, for the opportunity. I'm actually going to quote you, Pat. So for those that don't know, at some point in my early career, I reported to Dr. Pat. And I remember the one day I walked into the office. I'm not sure if he will remember. And I said to him, boss, I'm very anxious today. You know what? My mind is not here. I've just got news that my brother is not well. And then he said to me, well, what are you doing here? Go, jump on a plane and go visit him. And it was the anxiety of having to explain to my employer that I can't be at work, because of the fear of not being at work, because I had a personal circumstance. And another day he actually said to me, was it one of my colleagues, when your body talks, listen. And for me, now that I am in health and safety, it's something I say very often at the workplace, because only you know what your body is going through. And just bringing that back to what Dr. Mudau has said, I really, really, really like your emphasis on the spiritual aspect of the body and how your wellness is composed. Because let us be honest, in many cases, the doctor doesn't really have an answer for you. But the misfortune is the appreciation of these three aspects that make up the being. I mean, it's very difficult in a corporate environment to tell somebody, I'm not well spiritually, not many people can relate to that. So it's maybe something that we need to advocate, I mean, there's days when an employee or anyone, there's no blood, there's no wound, but you are not well composed for that day. But when you don't have an environment where that is understood, it's very difficult to articulate it. For me, I think what is very important is how you've addressed the four aspects of self-doubt, self-criticism, anxiety, and trauma. And I think a lot of that, as you've said, we inflict upon ourselves. There's a very common phrase that says, your lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine. So in many cases, we are put into deadlines, we are put into rush hour because somebody didn't do what they said. And we need to educate people to start asking those questions. Why is this an emergency? Who did not do what they did? Because you need to preserve your own space and create boundaries. But I also like what Jabu has said about creating boundaries and about being the change you want to see to a large extent, because you might find that somebody sets up a meeting for 4 o'clock, but it's time to go home at 4, or a meeting is running into lunch break and you need to have a body break. It's actually a legal requirement to have that break. What do we do under those circumstances? So I think as leaders, we have a duty to implement what Dr. Mudau has said, not just for ourselves, but to take those teachings out. So for me, I think those 4 aspects that Pat has introduced is very, very, very critical. And just the last one that really sticks with me was the mental and physical aspects affecting productivity, because we all are measured on productivity. Whether it's your productivity as a mom, you have to wake up and make breakfast, you need to make sure supper is there, you need to help with homework, whether it's your productivity as a spouse or whether it's at work. And we tend to ignore those invisible signs. And I think that talks to the spiritual and the soul aspect. So that was very enlightening. Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you so much, Pauline. Shall we go to Mthetheleli? Mthetheleli, please serve yourself on the issues of today.
Thank you, Dr. Pat. And also thank you, Dr. Mudau, for such an insightful presentation. My take on the talk of today, firstly, was the fact that everything that our body feels, all the symptoms, they are actually just something that is coming from our soul and spirit, as the doctor was saying.
Sorry, Ntemi, interject. We can't see you. Is there a problem with the camera or is
I think there's. Can you see me now?
Now we can see.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. As I was saying, I like the holistic approach that Dr. Mudau was talking about. The fact that we should not only look at our physical aspect, but the soul and the spirit, they play a very important role in our personal health. Also, he spoke about the support that the group that you hang around, they actually determine the direction that you take in life. So the support, in most cases, we look at the support on the positive aspect, but one can have a group of people that are a support to him or her, but you will find that they are not bringing anything positive to that person. So I think it's very important to as we grow, I think we can be able to choose our support structure in terms of who we hang around, who we listen to, and all that. But what I also want to bring on, especially to Dr. Mudau, maybe if he can talk about or respond to it, is personal health as to conflict management. If you look around, one leader once said, especially talking about South Africans, he says we are living in a very angry society. You will find that people nowadays, the things that they do, they are always in conflict. You know, when you talk about your domestic violence, you talk about crime, you talk all these illnesses. There is a conflict there. There is a conflict that arises by these illnesses. Even at work, there lots of conflicts. People they step on each other's toes, and there are conflict. Now, the capacity, firstly, to deal with the conflict. And secondly, what the consequences of that conflict, what remains after the conflict, you know, because you can deal with the conflict and maybe in a workplace and you'll find it's been resolved. But the truth is I have not forgiven the person that I think has hurt me or has come into my space and deliberately hurt me as I would perceive at that time. So how do we then deal with that, you know, looking at or how does that affect our personal health? And then, you know, that unforgiveness that we carry, whether it's at workplace, whether it's within our families, our neighbors, you know, because we are always encountering these conflicts. Even you drive on the road, someone will do something very carelessly, and sometimes a thought that says, if I had a gun, if I was a police, you know, if I had a power, I mean, to reprimand this person, I would have done it right now. And that arises anger within you, and I think it's a level. It depends on the level of your personal health, as we are talking about it today, level of your mental capacity to handle stress, as doctor was saying, and conflict management, consequence management. How do we then deal with all those things? I once read a book by Dr. Michael Berry, a pastor who's an author of this book, the Forgiveness Project. He says about 61% of the cancer patients, they have forgiveness issues. So I know that Dr. Mdawi, as an expert in that field, he can talk more on that. But I really think how we deal with conflict in our society, in our families, plays a very important role on our personal health going forward. Thank you so much, Dr. Pet.
Well said, Tisheleli. Before I bring in Dr. Mdawi, I just want to say to our guests that are connected, you are allowed to raise your hand. We'll acknowledge you if you want to comment. So that being said, Dr. Roth, let me just introduce this as follows. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. As Dr. Mte was talking about conflict management and so on. That being said, can I ask you to respond on what he has said and cover some of the issues that your panelists have actually raised?
Thank you. Yeah, so as he rightfully said, conflict management is a very important issue because it does affect our personal health. And I will break it down. Once again, let me say I've got an argument at home or at work, and that argument is unresolved. What it does to me, there is some level of tension or stress in me, you know, especially if it's in the home front or at work, or just say an important situation or person, whatever the term might be. When there's a conflict that is unresolved, there is a heaviness in me. And the longer the problems lingers around, there is that discomfort can come to a point where it is a stressor. So when that conflict is not handled properly, it can become a point of stress. Now, that's on the physical aspect, but maybe those who are, you know, more spiritually inclined would also say it opened doors for spiritual issues to happen within us in a negative way. So that also affects our own health as well. Okay, so that's how that unresolved or poor handling or poor management of conflicts affects our personal health. Now the question comes, how do we handle conflicts in a better way or in a good way? Now, I think there are different approaches, but what I personally found to work is to say, what happens outside, I choose how to react as to what happens in the outside. So, first of all, I am not going to be the creator or the contributor to that conflict if I can help it. That's number one. Number two, I choose how I react to outside circumstances. So in other words, if a conflict is arising because of X, Y, Z, I choose how to handle it. I can handle a situation in a way that it resolves the situation now. I can handle it to a point where it escalates. And most of the time, the issues that arise is the issues of self-defense or self-preservation. So it's about self-defense, it's about self-preservation, it's about being right, and all of that. So it stems from the self. So once we move away from this self, then we are at a point where most of the things that were potential conflicts will never be conflicts anyway. And because we will choose how to react or how to resolve that conflict. If a person is coming with an energy to say, if I say this to this one, this is how they will react, and I don't react, guess what? There will never be any conflict. But if I react in the name of self-defense, in the name of being right, there will be a conflict. And that conflict has got many endless possibilities of where it can escalate to. And in the end, as I said, it can affect my personal health in many ways. So my take is, I am willing to preserve my personal health, to pay the price to preserve my personal health and my personal peace, my personal joy, my personal well-being by not putting so much importance on self-preservation and proving to be right and all of that. As Dr. Petu said, sometimes the peace, the presence of peace is more important than about being right or wrong. I'm paraphrasing what you said. So in a way, once we are not determined to prove ourselves right, to be shown to be right, to be shown to be the correct one and all of those things, most of those conflicts will never arise. And even when things do arise, we can diffuse the situation by choosing. I will take it to the next level, to a point where I would say there were circumstances where I chose to apologize when I was the one wronged. So that's a self-choice, of course. It might not work for somebody else, but that's for me because I choose to preserve my peace and my well-being rather than to be right or to defend myself. That's how. Otherwise, people can then talk about the issue of mediator, of when there are conflicts and so on and so on. There are obviously professional ways to try and resolve conflicts that may arise. But from a personal level, that is the path, that is the way that I find that it works.
Thank you, Doc. Let me just go back to Pauline. Pauline, let me remind you this. When I was a young engineer, Doc, at Telkom, at ESCOM, and I was running process control engineering at the time, we had just commissioned one of the transmission substations. One of our executives at that time put a board at the entrance of the substation and read thus, "The plant is talking, are you listening?" And I took that to heart, Doc, and over a passage of time, I then coined that thing right to myself to say, your body talks, you need to listen. That being said, Pauline, I wanted to talk about the types of self-care from a spiritual point of view, from a social point of view, from an emotional point of view, and from a spiritual and also from a psychological point of view, where you can. Pauline, as I ask you to talk about this, one of the things I have in mind is where we don't understand the impact of social media in terms of what does it affect our social, our health and so on. Pauline, can you give that an attempt and I'll talk to the rest of the colleagues?
Thank you, Pat. Sure. I think before I go into that, very profound about listening when your body talks. And, we've come out of a pandemic and we forget that, or we've had to move on so quickly. when pandemic fatigue settled in, we haven't taken time as a nation to pause. And you spoke about the spiritual, the social, and emotional aspects. I think the pandemic has forced a lot of us into the spiritual realm because we were surrounded by death, we were surrounded by pain, we were surrounded by loss. And it has then forced corporates to align with that. So my worry is that we have quickly forgotten and we are going back to our old ways. The home-life balance that was created by the pandemic, by COVID-19, and now we're seeing a return to work. We are forgetting to take people along that journey. And we forget that people lost loved ones, they've lost jobs. In many cases, people are now coexisting with family, whereas before they had their own homes. And when you have nowhere else to turn, then you turn to spirituality. However, we then need to embrace that. We need to see more leaders in the workplace that understand that you need to create a smell in the place that's going to cater for that. From an emotional perspective, we can't have people switch on when you're at work and switch off. We need to understand that with the passage of time, we need to create a safe space for religious practices because that is integrated with spirituality. We need to create a safe space for understanding that it's not just females that are homemakers. We have fathers that are now homemakers because of the implications of the pandemic and economic circumstances. We have child-headed households. So in terms of integrating entire element, I think the shift that we really need to see is large corporate CEOs, people in positions of influence, having different conversations. We recently looked at the 7 shifts that need to happen in a workplace to transform us to where we need to be. I just worry that maybe at the end of a discussion like this, or at the end of a meeting where we talk about health and safety, or we talk about emotional wellness, wellness still doesn't get the attention it needs. And I'm not sure if the type of vibe, the vigor and verve around the World Cup that we've seen with the rugby, if we could get that kind of vibe around wellness, we can really, really change the narrative of our country. So for me, I think the power is with us. We just need to go back now and be ambassadors of that change. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you so much. Shall we then go to Jabu? Jabu, maybe let's just pick up on the trajectory that you were talking to a corporate group in the last couple of days. Let's talk about the impact of having a toxic boss, a toxic colleague, a toxic partner. How does it affect your personal health? Over to you, Jabu.
Indeed, it's as if Dr. Pat, that we went as far as those conversations to say, if there's toxicity around, whether it's at work or, at home, obviously, there will be issues.
Just give me a second, Sister. I see there's a guest there by the name of Malebu. I'll come back to you, Malebu. Let's just finish. Just allow Jabu to finish, and then I'll acknowledge you, Malebu. Proceed, Sister.
Thank you so much. So we were saying, definitely, if you are dealing with a toxic partner or colleague, your mental health will be affected. So it is important, first and foremost, to understand that there is an issue. There is an issue because it's easy to say, as one of the colleagues was saying, I think it is in Te, to say, how do you then deal with, conflicts? It comes to toxic environments again. How do you navigate toxic environments? It starts with acknowledging that there is a problem, and then if it's in the workplace, there should be proper channels, if I may say so, or processes to follow, because obviously, even if it's a boss, I do believe that if it is a boss, the boss has a boss, I often say that, but there must be there must be channels, in place for, the person, maybe the perpetrator or whoever, to report and get support. But it goes back to what my other colleague was saying just now, to say it's all about, especially in the workplace again, Ubuntu. Where has Ubuntu has gone? She was saying, the vibe of the World Cup and everything. If I have done something wrong to you, without extending it to be like a toxic, if I may say so, toxic process. Let us address it. Let us be professional, especially in the workplace. I often say it's nothing personal. If there's an issue, acknowledge, address, follow processes. Dr. Mudau did say there will be a level where you have to disassociate, to say, okay, I can't stoop to this level, I'll remain professional, but as long as the environment, is supporting, positive, energies and in production without, it can easily, not support, but we can easily shy away from toxic individuals, if I may say so. Sometimes systems have a way of cushioning and protecting such people. And again, one of my colleagues was saying, we need to be open up and speak up more than anything. Going back to families, sometimes it's not easy. Maybe it's a wife and a husband, or it's a mother and a daughter, and all those dynamics. But also we are at a space where we understand that these issues, you can't just solve them, because otherwise it becomes a vicious cycle, whether again at family level or in the workplace. If it's not resolved, that is why people now go into anxiety. So it's all about seeking help, speaking up, and supporting good vibes, like my colleague was saying. A big thing corporates that are pushing now is diversity, inclusion, and belonging. It's very important that whenever we do something, we need to be mindful of the next person. Am I not stepping on their toes? By saying this, by doing this, you may easily say something because maybe in your culture or in your circle, there's nothing wrong with it. Meanwhile, the next person, I will take it as toxic. But if we make time, obviously, get the right people to say, educate us on diversity, inclusion, and belonging. What does it say? Then we get people that are aware of themselves and their environments, and hopefully, we get to heal, in many ways, spiritually, mentally, and socially. There's still a lot of work to do. It's not like something that can, happen, overnight. But again, I use the word intentional. Let us be intentional, and let us be positive about certain things.
Thank you so much, Jabu. Shall we go to one of our guests? Malemi, please come in.
Thank you, Doc. Dr. Pet and also Dr. Mudau. Really, I think the session was really insightful. I just want to ask a question to Dr. Mudau, rather. He spoke a lot about, agreeing to choose your peace. And for me, that is something that I sort of also advocate when I'm dealing with the young ones. I'm also in the space of empowering the young people. The question I have, I think most people will agree as their leaders. The question that I have is, when you sometimes find that you can sense someone is given up, they're not interested in getting their help. You may not be the expert. Like usually if you are not the expert, you want to refer them to the expert so that they can be able to assist them. But you sense it as a leader, and as you deal with them, you sort of sense it that they're not really in that space of acceptance. The anxiety has really gone so deep, and the depression is really pulling them down. And you're just trying to uplift and ensure that they don't take their lives. And sometimes it's a failed attempt. They sometimes do take their lives, and obviously you're gonna have to deal with that trauma that you lost someone who was you were possibly going to be able to assist, but then they did not see that they could still come out of that. I just wanted to ask, how can we help such people and fast track that realization? Because one of my core goals is to help people, become anchored in their self-realization, because I believe that when your mindset, like you've been touching on a lot, that your mindset, it's the gear, the engine of your your future, or maybe how you can actually come out of that ditch. So I just wanted to, maybe ask that question to Dr. Mudau. How can you help someone, help people fast track their self-realization? Thank you so much for the opportunity to ask the question.
Thanks, Lebu. Thanks a lot. Before I allow Dr. Mudau to come in, I want to go to Mtetheleli and ask Mte to talk about indecision. How does it affect personal health? Once Mte has addressed that, we're then going to go back to Dr. Mudau to basically respond on all these issues. Once he has responded, I'm going to then open up for a call to action as we proceed. Mte, in that order, come in and talk to us about indecision and its impact on personal health.
Thank you, Dr. Pets, again. I think one of the very important aspects is communication, the ability to communicate well, healthy communication, because if you are lacking there, you will have something to say, you will have something that you want to do, but you are unable to maybe you are fearful, you are intimidated, and you cannot really communicate that. So that is actually holding you back on your decisions going forward, because you cannot grow alone. You need people, especially in a workplace. You need to get involved. You need to communicate your ideas. You need to communicate your feelings. You need to communicate your whatever that you think is troubling you. If we talk about the toxic environment, I mean, you can be in a toxic environment and no one is aware that you are suffering because you are not communicating. So the power of communication allows you to take a step forward, make those rightful decisions to solve a toxic environment, to be able to face someone whom you think, even if it's your boss or it's your colleague, you have to decide to face them, to take your points across, to say this and this, maybe I don't like, or I did not like how I was handled there. Or even if some colleagues were talking about listening to your body, you can listen to your body, but after you have listened to your body, you need to communicate that, to say my body at this moment in time maybe is not allowing me to continue. May I then take one or two steps? But for me, it's most of other aspects of personal health, they arise from how we communicate. Some people, they will not communicate with words, they communicate with actions, which you find that again may create an environment that is toxic, that is not healthy. So the power of decision starts from how we communicate with ourselves first, as through listening to our bodies, then taking that message across, whether to your boss, whether to your subordinates or your colleagues. That is taking a step forward. There's something that you said, Dr. Pett, when you started. You said if you are failing in your mind, you cannot win. So I think when we're talking about decision, and you find that you are failing to decide, and you are also failing to communicate your decisions, no matter how much you want to move forward, but you will not move forward up until you communicate what you're thinking. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, MT. Shall we then go back to Dr. Mudau to address the issues that have been highlighted? Over to you then, Doc.
Thank you for the question, Madam. One of the humbling things that things in life, in the years that have been in practice, in my line of work, I interact with people every day. And I have seen that people have got diverse problems, some worse than the others. So it was very humbling to realize that, providing a solution to somebody's problem or helping someone, sometimes it takes more than sympathy. It takes more than you wanting to help them. It takes maybe the knowledge of the books that you have read. So in a situation where you realize that person themselves has given them up, and you see maybe potential on them, and you might also want to refer them to right professionals to develop them further within them. Why I said the earlier things I said is to say there is a way of reaching out to a person. There is a point in life that the words that you speak are more than just words. There is something that they carry and they get through to the person. And that is a point where some of us have invested in our spiritual life, to say, when I'm speaking to a person, it's not just words that I'm speaking, but there is a life that those words carries. So I can be able to break the stronghold, beyond the strongholds, and reach out to the heart of the person, and to be able to make themselves to see their worthiness and their potential and what that they are able to do, and the fact that it's not too late for them in life. They can still be able to be developed, to be helped, and for them to reach their potential. So I think what I'm saying here to answer that question is to say, what I find very helpful, and I've seen that through experience time and again, is to say, when you develop yourself spiritually, you are going to be able to help people beyond sympathy, beyond your academic knowledge, and beyond your training. And that's how I'm able to help such kind of people.
Thank you so much, Doc. Colleagues, in the last probably hour and a half, we've had some interesting deliberations. I want us to move within the next 35 minutes or so, 34 minutes, and talk about what kind of call to actions do we need to make based on the deliberations that we've had. And I'm going to start off with Jabu. Jabu, what do you think the kind of call to actions that can be made to deal with the issues that we've spoken about? Jabu?
Thank you, Dr. Pat, for another opportunity. It's not an easy task once more, but I would say we need to continue to create awareness. I think we owe it to you to thank you for this, platform. It's a Saturday, you could be somewhere, but you decided that it was important that, we gather and discuss such topics. So it's all about creating awareness. It's all about being agents. I think one of the colleagues did say. So for me, I would say let's create more awareness, around mental health leadership. And let us be intentional about it. And as our slogan say at JFM Coaching, we will drive together if we work together. So let us drive together.
No, Jabu, I think you've been very economical. Also talk to us, what is the impact of social media, both to people like yourself and to the younger generation that is coming after you?
The impact of social media, obviously it has its positives and it has its negatives. It depends, I would say there's many of them. I won't call them by name, platforms rather, but it depends. You start by saying, what is it that I want to communicate? And then what is the right platform for me? And then do I understand the implication, especially when it comes to young people? you know, when you are young, sometimes you are just you are carefree, if I may say so, and maybe also just with less of understanding of the bigger picture when it comes to business and stuff. You can easily say something, but now it's a big thing that when we go for interviews to the younger people, you know, even your social media platforms and your pages, we know they get people to research and see what kind of lifestyle you are living. So maybe only to learn that somewhere, you know, in your pages, you commented about, you know, something that relates to the values or the actual company that you're being interviewed at, or maybe what you appear on social media as, or what you reflect on social media rather doesn't talk to the values of the company and how they do things, their ways of doing things. You can easily lose that opportunity. You know, again, social media can be good, you know, when it's used correctly. Like I often say, if you are corporate and you want to be professional, go to, I would say, LinkedIn, allow me to say so, you know, but again, you can't be on LinkedIn and, you know, communicating things that are usually seen on other platforms. So you choose a platform that will work for you, but also understand that there are, you know, dangers of using such platforms, especially if you are not fully informed. If there's a need to get somebody that is in the field, you know, tech gurus and everything, rather get somebody that will manage your page depending on what you do. And some people are making money out of social media. It works for them, but I guess it's the right platforms and they're actually talking to the right audience.
Thank you so much, Jabu. Thanks a lot. Shall we then go to Pauline? Pauline, what would you want to put across as a call to action based on our deliberations?
Thank you, Pat. I think as a call to action, we must recognize the one evolving area of personal health, and that's the integration of technology. Very important. AI is increasingly playing a role in personal health by providing personalized insights and assistance. So maybe in our respective spaces where we can influence the way forward, we need to bring in technology. We need to use AI to provide access to what's available. We don't live in a very advanced economy, and we need to take this information to the communities. We need to create awareness, like it has been said before, but more important than creating awareness, if you are in a position where you can influence policy, if you can influence plans, let's make smart devices available to students, to learners, to the aging, because I mean, AI is not the future, it's the present, and it's evolving at such a rate. I mean, imagine you have a smart watch, you have a little app on your phone that tells you that you didn't sleep enough, that tells you that you need to drink water. It can really go a long way. So for me, that's something I'm passionate about. And we need to unteach ourselves some of the old habits we have. We all have older people in our family that we remind them to take their medication. We phone them to see if they've had their meal. Why not change the gifts we normally buy and now buy them that little, I don't want to use any specific brands, but we have very easily accessible generic devices. So if you want to buy a Christmas gift for somebody, whether it's mom, whether it's your child, go buy that AI or that smart technology device and give them the gift of wellness through technology. Thank you, Pat.
Pauline, thanks a lot. But I also want you to talk to us about this. You know, let me introduce it by saying that sheep or ships are not, they don't get to sink because of the water around them. They sink because of the water that gets into them. That talks about the people that you allow into your space. Talk about that and the impact into your personal health.
You know, doctor mentioned that actually. Doctor said, let me see, he said it very nicely. I don't want to waste time, but he said the people that you surround yourself with. And you know, that is very important. Sometimes you can't control who you surround yourself with at work, but what do you do when you have control of your space? You know, as an individual, it's very hard, because if you keep telling your mind that this is difficult, it's going to embed itself. Now you're telling your spirit, you're telling your soul, you're harming yourself. So I think it goes back to self-love. And if we really internalize what Dr. Mudau said about recognizing the self as those three elements, each time you tell yourself, or each time you subject yourself to certain company, you realize that you need to then realize how you are projecting yourself into that influence. And it's not hard to step out of that. Life has given us opportunity to surround yourself by nature. Some of us have pets. And just observe for a moment how you feel after spending 10 minutes with your dog, as an example, or just, even if it's a person, tell yourself after that interaction. I'm not sure how doctor can make reference to this, but seemingly there's an invisible cord through which energy transfers between two people. Now you need to ask yourself, after I spent energy and now am I feeling down? Or after the interaction, is that person feeling drained? Am I feeling pumped up? But more importantly, you want to be with people after you interact and you walk your separate ways, you both feel energized. You both feel you gained from that relationship. So I think if we all look at our relationships, no matter how close the person is, it could be a sibling that drains you. Then you need to know where to cut that cord, that energy cord that is draining your energy. So for me, that's how you can select who you surround yourself by, and that's the best gift you can give to your internal self. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you so much. Well stated. Shall we go to Mte? Mte, as you give us your call to action, I also want to address the following. We have to invest in celebrating small victories. And how does it affect our personal health, amongst other things, as you take us through your call to action, Mte?
Thanks again, Dr. Pat. I think I take this from our panelists. They mentioned discipline. One of our panelists mentioned that we need to be disciplined. I mean, when we talk about personal health, it really needs to be disciplined, whether physically or spiritually, and also be intentional. I think the Bible also speaks about that, a conflict between the body and the spirit, the physical part of us and also the spiritual part of us, because there is always a conflict between the two. But once one is fed more than the other, I do believe that it is able to pull the other aspects and make it to submit to itself. If one is feeding the right information to the spiritual part, I mean, the Dr. Modau spoke about being prayerful, reading books that will assist you in your spiritual aspects. If you're giving more time to that, you are actually disciplining your body to listen to your spiritual aspects. And then in that way, you are then able to maintain the balance that Doc spoke about. You also spoke, I think Jabu spoke about the impact of social media. Imagine someone that is not well balanced in this aspect, and then they go into social media. I mean, social media, we talk about millions of people posting things there, advertising their life, of which in most instances is not the true reflection of what's going on in their life. And if one is not a balanced person in these aspects, they get affected, and then they don't see the importance of celebrating their small victories, because what they are taking in from social media is those people that are posting those great achievements. In this generation now, we have people that will simply go maybe to a very expensive restaurant and just take a pic there. They won't even enter. They will just take a photo and post it, so that people will think they've been to that. Now, if someone that is having their trouble personally, then they take that and it becomes a peer pressure on their side, and then we then forget about our achievements. I mean, I think Doc spoke about the competition that we put on ourselves, you know, when we look at what other people have achieved compared to what we have achieved. And if we compare the two, then we just forget about our achievements because we think they are small and they are insignificant. So the importance of celebrating small victory, I think it's very important because you are actually celebrating steps to your bigger picture or to your bigger vision. You know, you are just saying, I'm step forward, and then you pat yourself at the back, and then you appreciate that. If you are a spiritual being, you appreciate. You appreciate God about. Giving you an opportunity to actually achieve whatever you have achieved. You know, most of us don't really celebrate waking up in the morning. We don't celebrate that. We think that it's just casual, you know. Just tomorrow we'll just wake up up until we lose our loved ones. Then it hits us that life is really a gift that needs to be celebrated. Even before we have achieved anything, the fact that today we did wake up and then we are sitting here like this, we are able to share such insightful information. It's an achievement, you know, that needs to be celebrated. But then the question maybe will be, what are those small achievements? What do you regard as small achievement? Do you regard this session as an achievement? If it is, then it needs to be celebrated. I think that's where we need to start going forward. Thank you so much, Dr. Pett, Dr. Mdau. Thank you.
Thanks, Mte. Shall we give Pauline a chance and then Jabu before we go to Dr. Mdau? Pauline, briefly.
Yeah, I think for me, we need to then, as it has just been said, I even posted a note out there. We haven't learned from the pandemic. We haven't learned to celebrate life, but it's because of the fast-paced world where we are right now. We haven't paused. So we need to institute a bit of patience, a bit of tolerance, because as Doctor also said, the loving all and serving all. We need to rely on those of us who have the capacity to love. We need to build the capacity to love. And unfortunately, if your cup is not overfilling, you cannot pass on to others. So we need to step up. We need to decide, how then do I equip myself? And it's not necessarily in terms of material or in financial means that we can help people. You know, a tap on the back goes a long way. And it starts as close as your domestic worker. It starts as close as the lady that serves you the tea in the office. You know, just a gentle conversation of care with that person, and you can touch lives. So for me, I think let's start with the basics and change your home, you change your community, you change your neighborhood, you change your town, and eventually you'll see a change in the world.
Well said. Thanks a lot. Shall we then go to Jabu?
Thank you, Doctor, once more. So as leaders, we want to continue to drive this mental wellness strategy in our corners, in our spaces. And we need to know as people that life will remain challenging, you know, but let us adopt a positive mindset, you know, let us adopt positive mindfulness, you know, have things that are anchors, you know, have things that you say to yourself, affirmations. You know, I do affirmations a lot, and I actually teach affirmations with my clients to say, as we were saying at the beginning, if you are feeling bad about yourself, have a positive affirmation rather to counter offer that. You know, and also things like, you know, I would say one day at a time, tomorrow is another day. You know, I am complete. I am beautiful. I am strong. It's all about the mindset. It's all about speaking up. The other colleague said, you know, go out for help, reach out. And I know that, you know, please, the men in the core, please forgive me, but there seem to be a saying that men, or most men, it's not easy to share, if they're going through, difficult times, because obviously of socialization and, how we stereotype certain things. I also want to say that, also to challenge that, if you're a man and you want to cry, cry. If you're a man and you're going through something, just say it. It's not like you're going to be less of a man. I feel like I should preach that all the time, to say, equally as women, we mustn't say, if I say this, then I'll be, looked, upon as somebody that is weak or whatever. But it's all about being positive. It's all about understanding that, we are in this, and it's all about, being intentional about self-love. I think the colleague said again, to say it all starts with you. So in the morning, the very first person that you check in is not your partner, but it's you. It's not your kids or whoever that's in the room, but you check in with yourself and maybe with your higher power, because again, you want your cup to overflow, and then you want to thrive. We can't master life. I often say life is like a ladder of many unending steps, until we depart. It's just to say, remain positive, remain strong, but you can't solve your own issues. If there's issues, go out there and get help.
Thank you, Jabu. Now let's go to our guest speaker, Dr. Mudau. And I would want you to talk us through your call to action, but also include the following. What is the impact of unable or of the locus of control when it comes to personal health? There are two things when it comes to locus of control, but how does it affect personal health? Over to you, Doc.
Sorry, I just want to see if I understand. You said loss of self-control.
No, locus of control.
Locus of control.
Yes.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
No, okay. When you talk about locus control, it's about things that you've got direct control, that you can control, and then other things that are completely outside, when I swear it.
Okay, I get you. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. All right, no problem. So I think I would want to pick up where, Pauline said, first of all, you can't give what you don't have. So I think when ourselves, number one, when we are living examples of what we teach, if I'm going to talk about balance in my life, I must be an example of balance. If someone, before they know my life story, they can already read to some degree of what that balance is. There's a portrayal of that balance in my life before I even speak or interact with them. So, number two, at whatever various platforms that we're in, whether it be our work or whatever platform, let that be a platform that we can use to engage and make a difference. For me, I'm a doctor, for example. That's my platform of making a difference. Somebody else is whatever platform that they're in. So in those platforms, let us use that to bring about awareness and make a difference in people's lives. Then we obviously have bigger platforms, organizations like church, schools. So what it means is some people must be willing to be passionate and talk about these things. Let it be in schools, the churches must design programs for these things, and all the different organizations that people can think of. There must be platform to discuss about these issues and make people to be about the importance of personal health. Because like I said, you can have all things in the world. If your health is failing you, everything else will fail you. So I think, you talk about control. I will always, relate that to some degree. So to say, there are things that God gives you to be in charge of, that you can control. You've got the mind, the will, and the emotion, so you can make decisions. Like somebody said, one of the speakers, you can decide to dissociate yourself from toxic things and so on. Those things you have control. And as I earlier highlighted, you can control what you respond to the outside things, and that influences your personal health. So And there are things that may be beyond your control. And those things, for some of us who interact with God, that's where you leave those things that you are not in control of. And if there are other outside people that you can talk to and chat to, then that's also a form of, releasing things that are beyond you and, talking to somebody and so on. So I think one of the things I've been saying, and I will say it to this point, is people are realizing, and Pauline has also been emphasizing that, to say people are realizing that more and more the need of the foundational of a good spiritual foundation is becoming more and more apparent. I think, we are realizing that the spiritual is much more, is in charge of the supernatural, of the physical. The supernatural controls the physical. So the things that we are seeing unfolding in our personal lives, in the nations and across the world, we have to have a good spiritual foundation that will lay out everything else, not looking beyond the necessity of what we need to do in terms of our mind and in terms of our physical bodies. But it is becoming clearer in the days that we're in that we need to pay attention to our spiritual life. We need to pay attention, and everything sort of builds from there. And things become easier, to build when you have such a foundation. And that is my short.
Thank you so much, colleagues. At TLG 365, we start on time and finish on time, or before time. I think we've exhausted a number of good points. May I therefore ask Pauline to do a reference for us. Over to you, Pauline.
Thank you, Doc. And yes, it's my pleasure to thank our speakers for today. Let me first start with probably the one we forget about, Maji. Without your technical support and keeping us on track and on time, we sometimes forget the guys behind the scenes. So thank you very much. And to our speakers, our guests that came through, thank you for your contribution and for participating. I believe some of us are on YouTube, some of us are on Facebook, and some of us are on this platform. So very engaging, and I'm sure this is not going to be the last one that you attend. To Mte Mgobozi, especially for enlightening us and delighting us with some of your context. I like what you said about social media. It is so true that we are led into this illusion of a wonderful world, and it puts pressure on us. And I also want that M3. I also want that fancy house, and you might find it was just a green screen or somebody else's home. So we must also guide ourselves with that. To Jabu Msomi, clearly a life coach, for your wisdom and your leadership in that, and for all the other speakers that came through, but more especially Dr. Mudau. It's our delight, and I did a quick Google just before the session because I needed to know a bit about you, and next time I'm up north, I'm going to come and visit you. But I think I just want to touch on some of the things, not to repeat what you've said, but it's so important when you said we need to acknowledge where the world is. We need to understand our position in space, our immediate space, and our position in the world. Yes, there's wars that are going on. Yes, there's corruption going on. But what you cannot control and what you cannot influence, we should not allow that to concern us. So for me, I think that is so important. Recognize where the world is, but take ownership of your immediate world. The different dimensions of personal health, you didn't mention specifically religion. But I know that we all have this confusion between spirituality and religion. But I like your emphasis on spirituality, because your belief system doesn't necessarily mean you're religious or irreligious. It basically means what composes you. So that's something I'm definitely going to take back. But very important, when you said that we need to go back to the beginning, for me, and I'm sure for everybody in this room, going back to the beginning meant different things. But in my mind, I just got this vision of, when a child is born, that's their beginning. What you feed them, you're so particular. What you give them to drink, you're so specific. It must be what the doctor prescribed. The music that you expose babies to, the activities, it must be safe. And if we apply that to ourselves, our nutrition, if we apply that to ourselves in terms of where we expose ourselves to the dangers and the hazards, for me, going back to the beginning, let's look at that. When you came into this world, you were specific. Why did we allow the behaviors to settle in? And I would just like everybody to leave with that thought about going back to the beginning. The power of the mind, 100% correct, and that was touched upon significantly today. So I'm not going to touch on that. You spoke about the company we keep. But Doctor, I want to thank you more especially for when you spoke about, and this is a quote, and I think we must register that quote against your name, seeking the backing from the realm of the spirit. That is incredible. That is so deep, you know. When you said looking up for support because we have been made insufficient, that for me is so profound. And we need to accept that we were made imperfect because we need to reach out and reach up and look up for that support to then take us to that place of perfection. So for me, that's such deep wisdom. And lastly, the relationship with God, whatever God might mean to you, God might mean different things to different people. But that energy that feeds us, that energy that gives us the will to wake up and come back at the end of the day. I think you've said it so beautifully, and I really, really want to ask you to register those quotes on your website because it is very impactful. So thank you so much for the wisdom. I really thought we were going to come here and listen to a medical conversation, and you've taken us onto a different journey. And for me, it is mind-boggling. So I'm a changed person, Doctor. Thank you so much for that. And I'm sure all of us are as well. And then lastly, to our fabulous host, it has been said before, you've created this platform, and I think we are changing lives one day at a time, one person at a time. Thank you so much, Dr. Pat Mazibuko, and back to you.
Thank you so much, colleagues, and thanks, Pauline. Colleagues, our next session is on the 9th of December. And I see there's a hand there. Let me just allow Jabu to have a say, and then we can close. Jabu?
I was actually clapping, Doc.
Okay, just clapping. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I thought it was a hand. No, colleagues, thanks a lot. Our next session is on the 9th of December. We're going to be talking about economical and financial leadership. You know, Doc, my heart bleeds every time we approach a festive season. How our people in the country and also in the continent basically waste money, and come beginning of the year, they come knocking on your door. They've got kids that can't go to school. They seem to be making a lot of irrational decisions. So we thought within the TLT 365 team that we talk about these things and make sure that we create responsible people. That being said, colleagues, all the best, stay blessed, and I hope to see you soon. Enjoy it, and a very good afternoon and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pat.
Thank you, Dr. Pat.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Be blessed.